This is the second day of this February 1984 7-day retreat. I wanted to mention there is a very comfortable balanced chair here, which is not used by me during talk. If anybody wishes to use it, feel free to pick it up at the end of the walking period. If one has difficulty with aching legs during sitting, it's much easier to listen without aching legs. We'll talk and comment about a koan taken from the Blue Cliff record. It's case number 40 and called Nonsense, This Flower. Three different translations, 3 or 4 have fed into this translation, which I'm reading from Sekida, 2 Zen classics. In the introduction by Engo, a sentence caught my mind. I'll read it to you. When the action of the mind is stopped and swept away, the iron tree will bloom. Not knowing what tenses were used in Chinese, one could maybe say, when the action of the mind stops, drops, swept away, the iron tree blooms. The hectic tree or the desperate tree, the pained tree, the numb tree, that's what the iron tree means, the numbness. The bored tree, the dead tree. This is how the case, the main subject, reads. And this is about an interview that took place between a government official who was a student of Nansen and visited him periodically to meet with him, to talk and maybe learn. His name is Riku. Riku, while talking with Nansen, said, quote, Joe Hoshi said, "Heaven and earth and I are of the same root. All things and I are of one substance." Isn't that absolutely fantastic? Nansen pointed to a flower in the garden, called Riku to him and said, people of the world see this flower as a dream, or as in a dream. Or people these days see this flower as a dream. That's the end of this part of their meeting. Maybe it was the whole meeting. The government official comes in, and in the course of conversation quotes something he has recently read, which says, "Heaven and earth and I are of the same root. The 10,000 things and I are of one substance, of one body." Isn't that absolutely marvelous? And Nansen points to a flower. Maybe they walked out into the garden together. Points to a flower and says, "People see this flower as in a dream." This initial statement, which opens up the dialogue, one has heard it or something similar before, and maybe felt the same way as this Riku. It's an amazing and a most inspiring thought to think that heaven, earth, and I are of the same root. The same substance of one body. A statement that there is no separation throughout this whole universe. Can be an intoxicating idea. And we do intoxicate ourselves with ideas, just as we intoxicate ourselves with drink or other pleasures. You can have goose pimples hearing a statement like this. How marvelous it is that the stars and the moon, Milky Way, the land and ocean and the woods and valleys, and I are one, that I am all that. An idea like this can momentarily sweep us off our feet and off of our problems, which all come out of feeling isolated from heaven and earth. And feeling the results of the inspiration, which is sensuous. It is a real sensing of pleasure in this, good feeling, which thoughts can provoke throughout the body. One seeks to hear and read inspirational material over and over again. Maybe eventually it wears out and one looks for new words, new ways of putting it. But if one is attending carefully to inspiration and the effects of inspiration and the duration of it, one will realize there is something incomplete about it. And it induces this craving for more, or for it to come again. Inspiration is not seeing, is not illumination or understanding or enlightenment. It has nothing to do with it. It is fabricated by the mind, by the thinking mind, which has intricate and subtle effect upon the body. It's interesting that in all these statements about oneness, one doesn't hear, maybe it is being said, I haven't come across it, something like this: the desolate, degraded slums and I are of one substance. The battered, war-torn city with factions representing arrays of religions, great religions, shooting at each other, and peacemaking, peacekeeping, other countries adding to the shooting. The smoldering, battered, torn buildings, the stunned people, women, children, looking for scraps of food or shelter, and I are of one body. Recently I talked to a woman. We were visiting together. She had a little child, a 3-year-old boy. And one cannot help when one sees a little child, a little boy, wonder whether in a few years he too will be shooting or defending or keeping peace, whatever that means. And I mentioned an interesting news article, news item came over the news. That with all these recent events, American involvement in Grenada and El Salvador and Honduras, the registration for the army or for the military has increased. It was brought as quite an amazing statistic. And mentioning this to the woman, wondering how she would respond to this, having this little 3-year-old boy, she said, "That's good. It's good that young people come to defend their country, because this is a free country." And I'm not making this up, I'm not exaggerating. She continued, "This is free because here we're free to drink." I understand that in some of these countries, if you drink, you're flogged or put in jail or killed. We do go to war with each other because we are educated, trained, and drilled to go to war. And as long as we're acting out of indoctrination, drill, training, automatically, without understanding, without seeing, without knowing who we are, there isn't even a thought that there's anything wrong with it. And to the extent that we ourselves are on automatic, as one person put it, the instant there's not attention, we are on automatic. Test it, look at it, prove it, verify it for yourself. The instant there is inattention, the reactions are automatic. Where they come from, who drilled them into us, where we got it from is relatively insignificant. We got it from everybody, from each other, because our parents ultimately were each other's brothers and sisters. And whether one is indoctrinated as a Christian, or a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or an Indian, Muslim, Shiite, it doesn't matter in what name, in what symbol. Immediately there is separation among human beings. Immediately. You can say, well, no, not for me. I embrace everybody in my faith. So says everybody else in their faith. Then why separate oneself out in the first place if one is everybody? If one is of one and the same root and substance? Why call oneself by different names? And I don't mean the name we have that we put on our address so we get our mail, so we're not mixed up with our brother at home or sister. But the identification with something. Country, religion, ideology. We immediately, in joining that, are subject to the conditioning of that ideology, of that nationalism, of that religion. And you don't have to believe this or take it over from these words, but test it for yourself and look with open eyes. Being indoctrinated to shoot, we shoot unless there is a flickering of attention and awareness and looking and questioning going on. We are all, without exception, indoctrinable, programmable. Not just as little children, but especially as little children. Because our dependence as a little child is 100%. And to get what we need to grow, to survive, we will conform and obey. And imitation happens automatically. The little child imitates. It's an impulse. It's a capacity in not just the human organism. Much more so for, well, we don't have to go into that. So the people who come together in a conflagration, a strife, are equally indoctrinated to hate each other, oppose each other, kill each other. There's no difference in that. And we're all, without exception, totally vulnerable to conditioning. Not just that it's there, but to further conditioning all the time. As long as there's the fear of not belonging, fear of being alone, fear of insecurity, then we'll pay the price for what we think is some measure of security or the joy of belonging. This thing started out with, heaven, earth, and I are of the same root. The 10,000 things and I are of one body. All human beings and I are of one body. If we don't fix on superficial differences which are there, and we usually fix on those, comparing those and seeing how different we are, how superior we are, or how inferior we are to others. One doesn't fixate on that, but goes deeper into oneself. Into the automaticness of our reactions, even though we don't want to react as we already have, even though we do want to attend, we're caught up in busyness, as many people say. But what is this busyness? Busyness does not exclude attention. Concern with oneself, with one's aims and goals and progress, achievements, financial success, or success in relationship. And fear of failure. This cuts across all human beings. We're of one and the same family. We all were born of a mother. We're tiny little helpless beings with big adults around. Who most of the time were not seeing clearly, and therefore just passing on blindly what they had learned and suffered onto us. And we're repeating the same thing with our children. Unless awareness dawns of this repetitiveness and seeming endlessness of this cycle. And the question, can it be broken? Can it be broken out of? Because unless it is broken out of, wars continue. Degradation and desolation, destruction continues. Blindly. And sorrow continues, because we all suffer. Not knowing who is the creator of suffering and who is the victim of it. And whether creation and victimization are just one ongoing process of thought with its separation and division. It says here, when the action of the mind stops and is swept away, the iron tree blooms. How can the action of the mind stop? Thinking about this is clearly the action of the mind. Wanting it to stop is the action of the mind. Trying to figure out devices and controls to stop it is the action of the mind. It doesn't stop, it goes on. Thinking that heaven, earth, and I are of one substance is the action of the mind. And the good feeling that ensues from hearing a statement like this is the action of the mind, with the body and mind not being two separate things. It's one process, mutually interacting. How does Nansen respond? He points to a flower. He points to a flower. That in itself is enough. Or is it? Points to a flower and he says, people these days, or people of the world, see this flower as in a dream. He could also have said, how do you see this flower? Or how do you see this? Or what is this? Which means we have to see the dream. If the flower isn't clear, without any doubt, without any fog, then what is the fog? What is the bubble? We talked about the bubble the first night we were here. About this little boy born and died in a bubble, with this wish of once walking barefoot on the ground. Once seeing a flower. What is the dream? Maybe the dream is, if I look at this flower long enough, I'll become enlightened. Or, not as complex as that, one may have never heard about enlightenment, but the dream is, oh, this is a peony of the species so-and-so. Somebody else may be saying, no, it is that. It's not this. And then an argument ensuing, pulling out books. And all the while, the flower is not seen. It is important what the name is. Not that it is not important to name something or has its place. It does have its place, and it need not at all shield or veil the flower. If there is awareness that the name is not the flower. But often this awareness doesn't dawn, and because one knows the name, and the name already conjures up a little picture of a flower in the mind, or the idea of a flower, this real thing is hidden. It is veiled. Just watch it from moment to moment in your daily life. Here in a retreat, there is a special opportunity for watching, because there is no pressure of time unless one brings it with oneself, and that can be seen. And there is energy. Many people working on the same thing, namely on themselves, which is everyone. And words being spoken not to indoctrinate you, but to point something out which one can see for oneself. What is a spoon? What is a linoleum tile in the floor or a crack? If one doesn't think, oh, these floors really should be wood, then you don't see what you're walking on. And the wood is there, the critical attitude is there, which is a turning away. It is the fog, the bubble. Of course, having the opportunity to walk outside. A dried, shriveled up leaf sticking through the snow. What is it? If one thinks, oh, I wish spring was here, then one is caught in those thoughts and one doesn't see what's underfoot. One is caught in a dream all the time. Is that so? Or at times, maybe the veil lifts. And there's something one has never seen before. It's not fireworks. It's so simple, so ordinary. And yet whole. And then, oh, how long will this last now? Which is the end of it. It's the end of wholeness. There's me and wanting that. The division has started up again. Can Can one see that instantly? Without any kind of taking sides for or against oneself. Just seeing. Not saying I shouldn't want, I shouldn't judge. That's more judging and more wanting. That's the dream. The dream of words. And all that's connected with words. Including a feeling of security by having words. In questioning, sitting on your mat, questioning, attending. Who, mu, what is it? Or wordlessly. Do you notice the groping for something which is already words and knowledge of oneself and one's world? Seeing that arise, is it possible to question into total uncertainty? Not knowing where to place your foot or what to grasp with your hand? Naming, expecting, anticipating, and remembering. This is the dream. What is the flower? I don't know. There's a poem which goes with this particular koan, and it reads, hearing, seeing, touching, attending are not separate and different. Mountains and rivers are not seen in a mirror. The frosty sky, the setting moon at midnight, with whom will the serene waters of the lake reflect the shadows in the cold? Hearing, seeing, touching, attending are not separate and different. Mountains and rivers are not seen in the mirror. The frosty sky, the setting moon at midnight, With whom will the serene waters of the lake reflect the shadows in the cold? With whom? We will end here for today.